Thank you very much, Dara, Juliet, Iyad, and Chris. So hopefully everybody now knows where to do smart investing, where to put money. Next up, time for me to do some work. I'm going to be moderating the next session, and I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to be hearing from a satellite owner, a service provider, and a broadcaster on where we are with 4K today. So joining me, please welcome Alistair Roseborough, Director of Operations APAC, A&E Networks Asia, Alan Wong, Director Sales AsiaSat, and Shakunt Malhotra, MD Asia Globecast. Gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Good morning.
So 4K is a really interesting subject, and I want to sort of spend the next sort of half an hour or so sort of diving into what this means for our industry. And we've got the sort of complete supply chain, so I'm very confident we're going to have the definitive answer on the question. But I want to start with a sort of thought, just as I guess it's a consumer thought. I've got a 4K TV at home. Now, I went out and bought that 4K TV not because I was massively dissatisfied with my HD signal and my HD TV. I had no complaints with it whatsoever. I thought it was great. But when you go and look for a new TV, they always bombard you with whatever the latest technology is. And the latest technology is now 4K. It used to be HD. Before that, it was color. Before that, it was black and white. I'm not sure people, as consumers, ever have a gripe or a complaint with the technology that they have, but technology develops, and then that technology gets sold to consumers. And my feeling is that that's what's happening with 4K. 8K, we know, is in the offing. And so are we sort of on this endless hamster wheel of increasing technology and potentially creating headaches and problems for ourselves as an industry, because that increased technology comes with increased cost, with increased complexity, it disrupts services, it disrupts the sort of supply chains. And so, yeah, I'm just interested in sort of understanding what you guys think in terms of why we are even here talking about 4K today. I mean, Ali, how important is 4K to A&E networks from a broadcaster point of view?
Well, I think any sort of technological advancements that are really desired by the consumer in the market, and obviously I think it's a chicken and egg situation. Does the consumer really want or need this, or is this being pushed by the industry? But the reality is, as we've seen down the years with moving up to HD from SD, that it's something that the consumers will pay money for, and it's something that within our industry it can be used as an additional service. And I think that's certainly something that's already happening with some operators who are able to charge additional for 4K services. So I think the consumer demand will be there. And obviously, once that's pushed, the consumers will be interested in it. Now, from the broadcaster's point of view, that's our production of 4K material would be driven by that demand, and the consumers would then want to pay additional for it. Is something that we would, certainly be interested in. Obviously, I think to the point of your other questions, there's going to be a lot of additional costs in relation to producing 4K content, delivering it all the way through the supply chain, and then taking it to the consumer. So these are things that are going to have to be weighed up against the additional value that can be placed on those services and charged back to the consumer.
But when you create a piece of content today, when you go out and commission your latest series, I'm assuming that it is now 4K. You have to sort of future-proof for yourself. Is that right?
Yeah, so a lot of content, well, all content now is certainly filmed in 4K and future-proofed, as you say, as was done previously during the SD to HD switch, that a lot of content was shot HD and then down converted to SD for airing. So I think it's a similar situation now. We're producing a lot of content in 4K, but this then often goes through the post-production phase in HD and is delivered in HD. Although we are seeing some demand for individual pieces of content that is shot, produced, and edited in 4K. We're currently working on some content in Japan that is being shot and delivered to certain broadcasters in 4K. So there is some demand for, I would say at the moment, it's very much for big one-off projects. We're not looking at, being able to deliver multiple series, or looking towards delivering a channel, but there is some demand for some one-off projects.
Oh, so that's interesting. I mean, the fact that everything's shot in 4K, so it's there in 4K, but then is perhaps sort of post-produced, or a lot of the content for at least the linear channel post-produced and then sort of supplied in HD, I guess. So,
yes.
Shah Kun, sort of moving on to you as sort of the broadcaster, it comes to the sort of the service provider. How much 4K are you seeing coming through your system, and what does 4K mean for Globecast?
So, in fact, Louis, we started doing 4K test almost years ago, and then we saw a first launch of 4K channels for Virgin TV in 2018. And then recently in 2019, we did Africa Cup of Nations in Egypt, where 4K was being used. I want to go back to your previous statement saying that you bought a 4K TV and that's why you are expecting more from 4K TV. So I just want to address that point. Actually, you're absolutely right. As of today, we are in this session, we are talking about UHD. It's just because there are over 300 million TV sets out there in the world and 43 million TV sets which are being sold in China. And I agree with Ali as well in terms of production. So for production people, it makes sense for them to capture it as high a resolution as possible. And the underlying statement, I don't think that, Louis, you bought this TV just because you want to see more pixels on your TV. And that's where I want to add here, the main thing that 4K will make a difference for consumer is to improve in quality, and that improve in quality will come through using HDR. So just a bit more on HDR side is, as of today, each pixel is defined by 8 bits. But when you go to HDR 10-bit, those pixels will add 2 bits. And when I'm saying 2 bits, actually it will add millions of colors inside. So best example is a NASA who is doing 4K linear channel. So if you look towards universe, basically on HD and SD, you will see only black and some spots of white there. But when you do 10-bit HDR, in that case, you will be able to see a real black, or you will be able to see a contrast between them. So through Globecast, what I see, there will be more niche channels that will come up using 4K. And that's where we are looking forward to satisfy the appetite of consumer who hasn't bought 4K TV just for the sake of it, but to see a better quality. And watch out when you buy a new 4K TV, make sure it has HDR in its specification.
Yeah, so the concept of a 4K channel is an interesting one. I know that I was in Japan for a number of years, and the sort of having 4K channels sort of for a time seemed to be sort of the holy grail there. But there are very few 4K channels about these days. And Shah Kun, as you said, it seems like maybe it's a niche thing, or perhaps niche isn't the right word, but it's not mainstream. We're not going to see all of our channels become 4K, I don't suppose. So, Alan, moving on to you then, what's the role of 4K from a satellite provider's point of view? Where do you see 4K being used? And does that put a strain on bandwidth resources for a satellite operator?
Yeah, and back to the topics, I think 2021 is not the year for 4K, but it's the year for 8K because of the Olympics.
Exactly.
And and then because of thanks to the TV manufacturer, then I think anywhere, at least in the developed countries, they have a lot of 4K TVs. So when people need to watch 4K content, it is not difficult. So we ensure the delivery chain to the end user side already. And as a satellite operator, Asia has always been the incubator for 4K. And back to 2014, we already set up our UHD lab to evaluate and explore what we can be doing, what we can do for the 4K development. So, and now we have 4K full-time channels on satellite among different fleet as well. And also we have sport content that pushing out the 4K real-time delivery to the home user in a very efficient way. So this would help user to feel what would be the differences between 4K and HD or in the past days. And back to the HDR and also probably the high frame rate. So the consumer will feel the differences progressively. And then when they taste the 8K in Olympic, so we'll see a lot of differences and will push a lot of workflow changes in the entire production chain. So that's how Asia said, or as a satellite operator, what we can be doing, because we have the flexible bandwidth. So as long as there is a demand to support high bandwidth, we are the enabler.
Got it.
Thanks, Luis.
So just sticking with you, Alan, I mean, I remember when we were moving from SD to HD channels, one of the big headaches was, well, okay, an SD channel sort of took up this much bandwidth and an HD channel was going to take up so much more. And there was a lot of debate as to, well, what level of compression do you put on an HD channel? So it seems to me, and look, I'm a layman, but on the one hand, we keep on inventing these technologies for ourselves, which take up more and more bandwidth, but then we come up with ways to compress and compress and compress it so that it doesn't sort of take up more bandwidth. And I mean, is that something that we're seeing? And are there solutions that ultimately will be able to accommodate more 4K UHD services over satellite as we move forward?
Yep, I think the compression technology really helps the delivery of high quality contents, and progressively from MPEG-2 to MPEG-4, or even the nowadays HEVC, the development of the compression technology is not only benefit to the latest quality of videos, but it also helps to give a more efficient way to support, say, HD channel or even the SD channel. So it is not only thanks to HD or 4K or even 8K in the future. So we see compression, yes, it will reduce the bandwidth, but it also benefit how a broadcaster or a producer can produce how much more content. If they have more channels, then they can probably bring more revenue as well. So it's not just reducing the bandwidth on the transmission.
Okay, got it. Chuck,
may I add something here?
Please.
So, you mentioned about SD to HD. I think the most important thing for broadcasters and all of us is the monetization. Are you able to monetize it based on moving from SD to HD? So when you move from SD to HD, really the improvement in the quality came in, the flat screens were coming in, and therefore everybody saw that there's a difference. But from my point of view, I think 4K was a bit unlucky because the whole environment changed. In the sense that the OTT came in, and therefore the monetization methods also change in that direction. So just having more bandwidth on satellite, I don't think the consumers is going to pay. So in the new environment, what I see is if you want to start a 4K channel, then you have to some way join hands with the OTT players. So how does it work? In fact, that's what we were discussing before the session. Was if there's a sports series comes in, of course you would like to see a sports series through a broadcasting channel because it reaches millions of users in a single stroke. So what you can do is you can start doing your sports series and programs, etc., on the OTT platform. And when the actual match or actual live sports comes in, then you can use it satellite for delivery by using 4K. So in that case, you have a both win-win situation. And in fact, Ali pointed out before during the pre-session was exactly the same thing. You can do exactly the same thing for your new series. So when you're launching a new series, you can have your old series and old seasons. They can keep on going on the OTT. But the moment you have your 4K, that 4K can be broadcasted through satellite, or you can generate more revenue by putting it through the satellite. So the monetization is a key part here. It's not only moving a technology from SD to HD to 4K. It's monetization as well.
Of course. I mean, look, monetization is at the sort of the center of everything, because if we can't make money out of providing a service, then nobody's going to do that. And I guess it's monetization in terms of what the consumer's prepared to pay, but then it's also the cost of what it takes to produce and deliver something. So I mean, again, going back to the SD to HD sort of conversion, I mean, I remember sort of everybody was sort of going, well, what's the minimum that we can get away with in terms of bandwidth and still call it an HD signal? Is it 10 megabits per second? Is it 8? I mean, on an MPEG-4 signal, what was it going to be? And obviously, that was a justified conversation, because you want to deliver an HD signal at that time to a consumer, but you didn't want Globecast to charge you an arm and a leg, and you didn't want AsiaSat to charge you an arm and a leg. You wanted to sort of try to minimize those costs, which.
So just to be clear, okay, this is a very good point in terms of Globecast, how Globecast can help. So very first thing is, when I talk about creating a 4K channel, you can create a 4K channels in the cloud, and that's where a pop-up channel comes in. So Globecast can help you in delivering that pop-up channel. In fact, I'm very proud that recently, just a few days ago, our engineers won an award for mastering cloud and virtualization technology by creating infrastructure as a code. So again, and again, instead of having a 24 hours running channel, you can always have a cloud to create these pop-up channels, and these linear channels can be delivered into any form. Either you can deliver it through OTT or you can deliver it through satellites. And on your second point in terms of compression, once again, remember, digital revolution is non-stoppable. It will keep on improving. We will keep on seeing the efficiency coming in compression. And remember, when you have 4K channels, it will also benefit down the stream. Now think of it, when I was talking about HDR for 4K, why not apply HDR to HD? So if you apply that technology backwards, basically you get more efficiency of satellite bandwidth and better compression, and at the same time, good quality. So in that case, everybody benefits, whether it is, and this is a chance. Most of the channels are still SD channels, and there's a big potential for doing a HDR upgrade by using this new technology.
So Ali, on that question of monetization, I mean, as you said, you're producing all of your content in 4K, but it's not. I mean, most of that is not reaching the consumer in 4K. Now, is the reason for that because your clients are not demanding it in 4K, or the consumer's not willing to pay a premium price for 4K? Or because Alan and Shakunt won't give you a reasonable price to produce a service in 4K?
Well, I think certainly it's a combination of all of those factors, and I think it's going to be led through the consumer, obviously, to the broadcaster, and then on to ourselves and through the supply chain. But I think what's going to be very interesting, I think, with regards to, for example, the Olympics, if it's delivered in 4K, I think other things like Netflix, allowing an upgrade for a premium price to be able to view 4K if these things are a success, then we're going to see it followed by additional providers, and then the demand will grow. And once the demand grows, I think it's a very good thing for a broadcaster to be able to add that as a value add. So, you know, if you can provide content in 4K, it's going to give you a differentiation point, and it's going to make your content more valuable. But I think it comes first to see if the providers who are doing it already, for example, like Netflix, see it as a really additional revenue stream that consumers are willing to pay for. And again, I don't really see that it's going to penetrate down to the mass market. I think it's going to be much more on big special events or a major series. And like Shakun said, whether that's creating something completely different, like a pop-up channel around a specific series, or creating a whole big series in 4K. But I think it's going to take, I don't see it would be 2021 where we would get that into the mass mainstream.
So you talk about Netflix, Ali, which is obviously an OTT streaming service. So, I mean, is it perhaps the case that 4K is a better fit for OTT services than it is for a 24-hour linear channel? Because we're just talking about individual pieces of content which can be served at the time people want to watch it, rather than having to have a whole 24-hour wheel and the infrastructure to cope with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly currently that is how we are set up, and through the whole production and through the whole post-production and the delivery chain, I think it's certainly set up that it's going to be difficult to find a cost-effective solution to do that in 4K currently. I think it's going to be much better suited to the big events. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be, for example, the Olympics, you could do a 2-week pop-up channel as 24/7 channel, but to do 24/7, 365, I think is a different story.
And Shakun, I mean, again, back to that question of sort of OTT versus linear. Are you having people approach you and sort of say, look, we want to be able to provide our content to an OTT service? Can you help us deliver that 4K content? Is that becoming a part of your business today?
Absolutely. As I mentioned about the Africa Cup of Nations, that's what exactly happened while we were producing 4K from the stadium. But once it comes into our facility, we use Digital Media Hub for converting 4K into other streams. And that's how our customers are able to monetize it and remonetize it by providing different profiles to the OTT players. And remember, as I said, that I don't see it as OTT versus 4K. And again, somehow OTT and the linear has to join hands. And as I gave an example for the OTT services, and that's where I see it going, where you can use OTT to create a buzz, and finally any live signal, because whatever you say, if you are delivering live signals on OTT, and still your engineers has to play around with the latency and with the jitters and all kind of things. So therefore, in coming period of time, for sure, there is a need of live channels, and sports is another example. Maybe tourism can be another one that can be used for delivery of 4K channels.
And you mentioned sports, so I mean, Alan, and you mentioned sports as well. I mean, is 4K, is that really, is sports a central part of the sort of 4K proposition for your businesses?
Yes, I think eventually the people will love to watch high quality sport event as well, and then it will spreading over and make 4K just like HD nowadays as a commodity or that people need every day. So we are doing some small steps to see if a sport event, they have the live feed of 4K, we help them to deliver through satellite and reach out as much people as they can. So sport event is mainly driving the technology that put on the field. What would be the differences between high frame rate and current 25 frame per seconds, or etc. And as well as the 10 bits or 8 bits. Now you watch the football field, you can't see the grass, the differences. But now when you have 10 bits and HDR, you will see the difference. So, and also another point is how people are doing the filming of the content, just like say the depth of field. If you're always seeing the blurry background, just like what you watch HD today, and when you compare to 4K, they can't tell the difference. So maybe somehow when people produce the content, they will also see whether they need to change the technology or the skill on how they film the content as well. So people can tell more difference between HD and 4K, and progressively will move towards 4K or even 8K in the maybe near future.
So I want to come on to sort of both of those points, and I'm going to incorporate some of the questions. We're getting quite a few questions from the audience as well. So one of the questions is, with so many viewers in the next generation watching video on phones, laptops, tablets, will the market be as accepting for cost increases for 4K, 8K as it was for HD? And I want to add my sort of own question on top of that as well, because I think it's really important that we're living in a part of the world where the predominant screen is, get it in the screen, it's this one. It's your mobile phone. In so many markets, that's the screen of choice. So, I mean, why do you even need 4K, let alone 8K, on a sort of 3-inch screen? I mean, it would be impossible to tell the difference. So I guess sort of two questions there. Is 4K and then eventually 8K an irrelevance for people if they're just going to be watching on the small screen? And level of acceptability from consumers to sort of to pay more for that experience? Alan, I'll stick with you.
Yep. I think gradually people won't have so much difference saying between SD, HD, or 4K, or even 8K. People will just want to watch content, watch their own preferred videos. So no matter it is on small screen or big screen or small screen, it mainly depends on whether you are on the go or you are sitting at home to enjoy a big screen. So my point of view is the video quality will just becoming a name, but in terms of production, people will always produce the highest quality and ensure when people want to pick the best one or the medium or the low quality because they are on the move, so they will just select by the computer itself.
And Shakun, how do you reconcile, on one hand, more and more people are using smaller screens, and on the other hand, we've got 4K now, we've got 8K coming. I mean, how does that make any sense? How does it all fit together?
You know, Luis, another one thing, we are humans. We have to keep seeing improvement over improvement, and that's where I'm saying digital revolution is absolutely unstoppable. You cannot stop it. So let me make a point here again.
So I was just going to say. Go ahead.
So let me make a point here in terms of another thing with humans is we want to socialize. Unfortunately, with COVID situation, that is not possible. So think of watching a sports event in a pub or a bar or in a club, along with your friends, watching on a big screen, and then sharing your experience with them. I think 4K and 8K perfectly make sense in that case.
Right. Yeah, I was going to sort of say people want to see the highest quality, but that's the point you just made. You've got to be in an environment where you can see it. I mean, my understanding is that for 4K to be meaningful, you've got to be sitting exactly the right distance in front of your TV, and your TV must be 42 inches or bigger. And so, yeah, I mean, the relevance of having 4K or even HD on a small screen device is questionable. And I think the cost is interesting as well. So I'm married to somebody who will, if we're buying a piece of content, and if there is an SD option and it's cheaper, she will always go for the cheaper option. And I think that's talks to the sort of the price sensitivity of it as well.
Yeah.
I mean, Alistair, your thoughts on small screen versus sort of 8K and how we sort of marry those two divergent concepts?
Well, I think obviously, I think the sort of acceptance of 4K and bringing 4K into the market much more, I think has certainly been slowed down in the past couple of years by obviously the huge breakthrough of OTT services, and like you say, that people are watching much more content on their phone. So I think that is certainly something that has really created a crowded marketplace for, you know, an individual only has a certain amount of bandwidth. When SD went to HD, that was the big story in the market. Whereas I don't think at the moment this is the big story sort of in the broadcast TV market. The big story is the launch of multiple OTT services that's all vying for the consumer attention. Obviously now, like you say, people have got multiple screens to watch on. You know, it's not just this big TV in the living room where we want to get the highest resolution. But in saying that, people still do want to, you know, have the best technology. And I still think people will go out, and when they upgrade their TV, which, you know, for some people is every couple of years, they will now buy 4K and they will want to experience 4K. It's just going to come down to the cost of the delivery of that content, you know, to somebody's living room. But, you know, I think people will still want to experience that.
I think I totally agree with you. It goes without saying that the television manufacturers are a marvel, and well, their marketing departments are just incredible at giving you a reason to upgrade your new TV. I mean, obviously, the moment I bought my 4K TV, then the next thing was, it's not just LED, it's got to be QLED or QLED or whatever it is. I have no idea what that Q is, but there's a little part of me which wants it because I know that it's sort of bigger and better. We're almost out of time, and I just want to ask you one final question, which again it's a consumer question from me. So with my 4K TV, potentially watching Netflix, which has sort of 4K content, I'm in Singapore. I've got the 1 gig fiber broadband to my house, and as I understand it, to watch 4K. If my sort of Google searches are correct, you need a broadband connection of some people say 8 megabits per second, some say 15, but under any scenario, I'm way above that threshold. And actually, this doesn't happen on Netflix, I've got to be clear about that. But sometimes when on other services, which will remain unnamed, I'm watching what purports to be 4K. Actually, it doesn't even have to be 4K, it can be HD. But it starts buffering, and it starts slowing down, and it just becomes a mess of pixels on my screen with that sort of bandwidth. I mean, Shakun, why does that happen? Anybody?
you have to go back to the basics for that, Louis. So it's very simple. The very fundamental basic of IP services is buffer. So in any router, in any Ethernet switch, you will see a buffer. And if your engineers are able to manage that buffering, they will be able to deliver the best services back to you. So, and that all relates back to the latency, that all relates back to the quality of the video that you're getting. So that's one problem. Second thing is about the processing power of your player. What kind of player that you're using. So as you said, in Netflix, you do not see that kind of buffering. So it is the player which has been designed to handle that buffering beautifully, and that's why you're not able to see it. So again, it goes back to the case of when you take about live signals, then you do not see that kind of a buffering coming through the satellite. But when you use OTT services, you might see that kind of buffering that comes despite of the fact that you have enough of bandwidth which is available to you.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, Alan, no buffering on AsiaSat, is there?
No, we don't. Linear channels doesn't need buffering.
Exactly.
That's the benefit of satellite distribution. Yeah, and also the latency is much lower than OTT's network because we are not relying on IP. So that's the difference. And I think you're absolutely right. 1 gig gigabit internet should be no problem for watching 4K or 8K material. So it's just a mechanism on how the algorithm to make you on a computer easily to watch the stream smoothly. So that's why so-called the buffering. So in Apple or Android, they do have 30 seconds or to 1 minute buffering for the content before you are able to watch it.
Perfect. Well, listen, we're out of time. So Ali, Alan, Shakun, thank you so much for joining me this morning. It's been a fascinating conversation. I think 4K is obviously here to stay. I'm pretty sure that 8K is going to be coming. How it gets used, how it gets deployed, I think we'll see as time comes. But it's clear that as an industry, we are challenged and we need to continue to grow and develop to be able to accommodate the growth of technology. That's what ultimately our industry is all about. It's that development of technology. So thank you all very, very much.
Yep. Thank you, Luis.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Great session. Really enjoyed it. Fascinating conversation for me. As you can tell, I'm a consumer. I want to get some of my sort of thoughts and questions in there. Just a reminder, so we're coming up for our last session in a minute. So probably about halfway through that session, the polling will close. So if you haven't asked the question yet, if you haven't answered the question in that polling box, which is to the right of me, please do take an opportunity to do that. It only takes 2 seconds to do it. You just got to choose one of the answers. A reminder that the question is growth will come from, in the next 5 years within the satellite industry, that's going to come from satellite services, satellite manufacturing, space launch services and vehicles, or ground equipment. So just a reminder, please do answer that question if you can. Again, networking tools, take your time to sort of look around. The key one to note while you're watching the video and you want to multitask is that little paper aeroplane icon in the top right-hand corner. Do sort of send messages to friends, colleagues, peers in the industry that you know are taking part in this.